We were sitting after work on a Friday at a local diner we called our bar. The four of us listened as Bill Chapman once again told how he had recently learned that his wife, with whom he had lived for 25 years, had once cheated on him. The other three supported him and repeatedly pointed out the cost of a divorce if he decided to go through with it. The four were lifelong friends, and I was invited into their company shortly after I arrived in this small town. All five of us served in the Marine Corps. I came to the coastal town of Spuzzum after throwing a dart at a map hanging on the wall over 10 years ago. Upon arrival, through a newly created offshore LLC, I bought the only grocery store in the area and expanded it. Back then, Spuzzum was a logging town with a population of about 1,000 people. The nearest town was half an hour away. Within a year, I had grown the business, received a liquor license, and tripled the size of it. The gas station came later. The store offered everything you needed. I now had 8 permanent employees and 6 temporary ones. A year after I started working, I began building a wooden house on a plot purchased at a tax auction on the outskirts of the city. My 4 friends spent hours helping me with the project. Because they all worked at the mill, I was able to buy untreated logs at wholesale prices, which saved me a ton of money. As a result, I now had a 3-bedroom, 2-story, 800-square-foot timber home with views of the village and coastline. The only problem they had with me was that, as far as they knew, I had never married and I had not dated anyone since I arrived. Rumors said that I was a confirmed bachelor, although no one had ever seen me pursue anyone. Women respected me, but soon realized that I was a bachelor and would remain so. I was someone everyone could trust, and they did. Everyone had a lot of questions about me, but they soon learned that I was a very private person who didn't talk much about my past. I created an LLC so that the company paid all taxes. Any money I took out for personal use came from retained earnings, so when I filed my income tax return, it showed no income. I paid for everything with cash or a debit card. I didn't even have a personal credit card. The only difference was that I was now using my middle name instead of my first. The sign at the entrance to our village said, "Next stop, Japan." No one knew that I came from New York State to the Washington coast because of what happened in my past. I've often wondered what idiot came up with the idea to name the place Spuzzum. After the second beer, we parted ways because Bill's eldest son was returning home from university that night with his fiancée. Bill's wife drove to Seattle to pick them up. We were all invited to a barbecue on Saturday to celebrate his graduation and engagement. Bill wanted to be sober and wait for them. After all, he didn't want his future daughter-in-law to think that he was just the town drunk. Stephen had been hired by one of the largest investment firms in New York, so we all knew how proud Bill was. I arrived last, as usual, fearing that the wife of one of my friends would again try to set me up with someone else. They treated it like a game because they were dying of curiosity whether I liked men or not. Their ignorance only fueled their interest, so I tried to be the last to arrive and the first to leave. Connie, Bill's wife, saw me pull up in my old restored 1940 Ford. I considered him my pride and joy. "You need to meet Stephen's girlfriend. She has red hair," she said. "Jennifer is 22 years old. She has 2 sisters and 3 brothers. I fell in love with her at first sight. Her appearance alone suggests that this is a person worth knowing. I already realized that she has a heart of gold. I'm warning you because we both know that when you see a redhead, you become silent, distant, and sad. I've often wondered if the redhead scared you in the past. I don't know because you don't say anything. Grab a cold beer before you join us in the backyard." Grabbing a cold beer, I headed to the backyard to find the whole gang already there, including all the kids and a few extra. Stephen saw me and rushed towards me with a hug. After thanking me for the 100th time for covering the cost of his education, he led me into the crowd to introduce his girlfriend. When he called her, Jennifer turned to me. My face turned white. I froze and tensed. I looked like I had seen a ghost. My first thought was to run away. The path of life that was imposed on me was on the verge of being exposed. I wasn't sure I could stay and face it. Jennifer was an exact copy of her mother. Jennifer was one of identical triplets. The last time I saw her was the morning of the day I found her mother and my brother in our bedroom, making love like two dogs in the heat. I was so nervous that I couldn't speak. She, like her mother, was a natural redhead with a body that radiated sexuality. At 5'6", she was very attractive and had curves in all the right places. Like her mother, the shape of her ass and hips were her best assets. When she saw me, her blue eyes lit up, as if they were on fire. Tears flowed immediately, but it was the big smile on her face that showed that these were tears of extreme joy. I was on the verge of losing control as pain, grief, and loss stared me in the face. Seeing her as a beautiful adult, that warm smile made me realize again how much I had missed in my children's lives. "Oh God, I don't believe it," Jennifer screamed through her tears, expressing her emotional joy as she rushed towards me. "You are alive. I knew it. My heart would never allow me to believe that you were dead. We were all told in the family that you were dead, and no matter how hard they tried to convince me, I never accepted it." The silence became so loud that we could hear the breeze. Everyone had a look of shock on their faces. Nobody knew what to say. They had to wonder, what is it all about, when Jennifer threw herself into my arms? Everyone was shocked and amazed. Stephen, breaking it, said, "How do you know Charlie?" "Charles's full name is Jonathan Charles Barnes Roman III," she said between sobs. "I know because he is my dad. I would recognize his face anywhere. The family always explained that he committed suicide due to economic problems, but I knew in my gut that something was wrong. When we asked about him, my Uncle James, my father, was always very quiet. He only did this when he had something to hide. As we grew up, we discovered that this was his way of not acknowledging the truth or facing it." I wrapped my arms around her, squeezing tightly as she buried her face in my neck. Tears flowed from both of us. It's been 15 years since I held one of my daughters like this. At that time, she was 7 years old. At that moment, the love I had hidden for so long exploded. Our emotions were released. Everyone heard our sobs. Knowing that everyone was waiting for an explanation, I carefully considered my words, trying to calm both of us. I have to say it took both of us a while. My family cast me out so they could hide their lies and secrets. For them at that time, it was very important to preserve the name of the family, its public political image, and honor without reproach. I was forced against my will to sign. This was because earlier I had entered my house and found my older brother making love to my wife, Jennifer's mother. I had just returned unexpectedly that day after dropping the girls off at school because I had forgotten my briefcase that had the files I needed in it. And before I left, I watched as he took possession of my wife and claimed his right to it. I explained. My brother and my wife never knew I was there until the very end of their kisses. I videotaped their lovemaking with my camera before confronting them. They laughed at me for catching them like it was nothing. I left in tears. They showed no guilt or remorse. After I showed their video to the judge, my grandfather, her family, and mine decided that this mess needed to be sorted out so that everyone could protect their important political careers. This was also done so that my brother, the chosen one, could marry my wife. I continued through tears. Marrying a widow with 3 daughters would be a big plus for his political career. Time has proven this to be true. For over 15 years, to those who know the family truth, including her mother, I have been a dead man walking. Now I'm just Charlie Barnes, nothing more and nothing less. If fate had not intervened, no one would have ever known the truth, I said sternly. Never in my wildest dreams did I see the truth coming out. Everyone was stunned. Some looked like they were going to throw up. I noticed that Connie was looking down, trying to hide her shame. She began to understand the consequences of her actions through the eyes of another person. Little did she know that once the genie was out of the bottle, nothing would be the same. No one who has not gone through struggle and separation could understand the hidden pain. As I held my daughter for the first time in years, I faced the unintended consequences of family secrets. At that moment, I felt ashamed. Then my tears started flowing again. Mutual healing began for my daughter and I. For my grandfather, only 2 things were important in life: money and power. The rest was just nonsense. He had both. My first mistake was that I went to talk to him after I found my wife and brother. I was emotionally devastated. At the time, the judge was being considered for a position on the Supreme Court, and a scandal could ruin his chances. By the time I had finished telling him what I had discovered, he had already begun to plan how to resolve it without the events ever coming to light. He watched the video, and for the rest of my life, I never heard him swear so much. His first call was to my wife's wife, a senator from Maine. He explained to Raymond Thompson what I had caught and recorded. I sent him a video file. Joan's father's anger was clear. He was not happy. He said he would take a private jet. They both agreed that nothing would be done until all three of us talked. Before making the next call, he turned on a program that recorded the conversation he was about to make. With a cold expression of severity, he called my wife. Listening to a one-sided conversation where the words cheater, bastard, bitch, and other derogatory names were used would have been comical if I had not thought to use them myself. It came down on her with the weight of a ton of bricks, making it clear that she and my idiotic brother were acting like irresponsible teenagers. If this gets out, your father's career is over, and so is mine. Nothing would happen, Joan, if you learned to keep your legs together. It wouldn't be a problem, but James is family, and the media will make a big deal out of it. My grandfather said that journalists would shout about the incident on the front page. Putting his finger to his lips to silence me, he put the phone on speaker and then asked Joan if her 3 daughters were really mine. She said yes. My grandfather said, "Well, how can you be sure? Perhaps since you turned out to be nothing more than another man's bitch, we should run some blood tests to make sure." Joan became excited. Angrily, she replied that the affair with James only began 3 years ago, which clearly shows that there were no others. The judge said, "Why should we believe everything you say?" She indicated that she took the pills because she did not want any more children. For all we know, James may not have been the only lover you had on the side. My grandfather then asked if she loved John. She said, "Yes, I always loved him, but now that has changed. I used to love him the way a woman should love her husband, but now it's more like a sister loving her brother." These words broke my heart. The judge saw my pain. It was as if she had stuck a knife into my heart. The judge was now furious to witness my tears and pain. Joan said, "I think James and I are to blame for this. If I had worked as hard as John on our marriage, this would never have happened. James noticed my sexual attraction to him before John, and I got married and deliberately began pursuing me after he moved in with us." Joan went on to explain that they allowed their physical attraction to control them. It got out of control, and I eventually gave in to his constant advances. With Jim staying with us as he began his civilian life, while John was away on his many business trips, our desires took over. At first, it was purely physical. We didn't realize it until it was too late that we had fallen in love. By then, we didn't want it to end. We were content to keep it a secret from his brother. We haven't thought this through. I believe it was not our intention to hurt John. We didn't decide what we were going to do until John caught us. Unfortunately, I could tell from her voice that she had no feelings of guilt or remorse. There was nothing, not even a little regret. She wasn't even ashamed that they had been caught. My grandfather saw tears running down my face. Their destruction of my world was now complete. My grandfather then asked if she loved James again, just to be sure. Joan said yes. After John caught us, he left. James asked me to be his wife, and I agreed. My grandfather responded, so James took his little brother's wife, children, and his life. What kind of person would do this to his little brother? What woman would allow this to happen? How could you do this to another person? Do you think John deserved this? Bitch. Joan said we won't deny John's right to see the children whenever possible because James plans to run for political office. So whatever we do, it must be done quietly and carefully. Publicly, James is supposed to be their new father. John will be a distant uncle. As you know, courts are still reluctant to grant sole custody to the father. My grandfather then said that perhaps the only thing he had left to say to James or you after we resolve this matter is that I never want to hear a word from you again. Before my eyes, you are both dead. He then threw the phone in anger. I've never seen him so angry. Looking at me after a long silence, my grandfather said, "Remember the pain, suffering, and your loss. They made it clear that you were written out of their lives and your own. It's better for everyone now if you were dead, because that's how they perceive you. What they flush down the toilet means more to them than you do. Do you think they did all this on purpose to get caught? In my opinion, it looks like this. When your chance for revenge comes, show no mercy, take no prisoners, but leave them alive and destroyed. Remember, dogs always come back to their own vomit. Damn it, I wouldn't believe it, but she really is a sneaky, dirty bitch. She should have become a politician. It's a pity that murder is not legal, otherwise I would have killed your brother myself." With these words, my grandfather punched the wall, breaking his arm. He then looked at me and said, "Remember, Jennifer, it was never my choice. Both families decided it was best for everyone after listening to your mother's phone call with the judge. Joan and James arranged it so that I would have to disappear. The accounts to which they promised to transfer the money to me never actually existed, which raises suspicions that they wanted to kill me." She then said she was going to call my dad at his office and give him the phone. I could hear his office door closing as my father said, "Hello." I replied, "Hi, Dad." "John, is that really you?" he asked quietly. "How are you, son?" "Yes, it's me." "I'm fine. Jen can explain everything." "How is your mom?" "What do you know?" I answered. "We found out about this whole story about a week after the publication of the story about your suicide and the reasons why they considered it necessary. We're a little older now, but overall healthy. You will be proud of how well your daughters have grown up. But tell me how Jen figured all this out," asked my father. "She found me by chance. It turns out that her chosen one is the son of a good friend. His family held a barbecue to introduce her and celebrate his graduation from university. When Stephen led me to her, when she turned to me, she immediately recognized me. We have kept in touch ever since," I said. "I need to stay hidden until the wedding, so I fly in on Thursday evening with the groom's parents and their family. Do you think I can stay safe if I take a helicopter to your estate? I'll make sure the landing area is lit, and we'll give the staff a few extra days off with pay. Your mom will be delighted to be able to cook us some dishes. Just let Jen know your arrival time," my father said. After a few words, he made it clear to me that he was not going to tell my mother. He wanted it to be a complete surprise. The following Monday, in the European markets, according to FBN, the stock price of my former company fell by more than $20. On Monday morning, as soon as trading began, I purchased another 1,000,000 shares at a price of $101 per share, buying them short. That evening, as I watched the price drop, I placed an order to buy 4,000,000 shares at $45 per share, trying to get it to the lows and sell all the shares I owned at $65 per share. The media, including CNN, led the way in destroying James and Joan Barnes and everything associated with them. Incest, possible murder, and cuckoldry dominated the printed pages. As a Republican, James allowed CNN's Anderson Cooper to rant, making the best of the situation. CNN's ratings were huge. They had a large number of reporters stationed at their gates. Based on facts proven by the media, the FBI announced an investigation into my disappearance. On Thursday morning, my former corporation announced that CEO Joan Barnes had accepted a buyout offer. Everyone knew that she was forced to leave. Her connection with the corporation was destroying them. The stock price began to stabilize at around $35 per share. On Friday afternoon, the stock began to rise, but personal problems for my brother James Barnes began to worsen. Now he faces a Senate ethics investigation. There were hourly calls in the Senate and among the media for his resignation. In his only public appearance, he repeated the story that he and Joan began dating seriously only after my alleged suicide, and that the conversation between the former judge and his wife must have been fabricated. The video of them making love, he said, should have been created later. CNN announced that they were going to conduct a voice audit to see if the voices of both sides of the conversation could be verified. They found a recording of James publicly declaring that I had committed suicide and emphasized that to date no evidence of death had been found. On Friday, Joan's father announced his abrupt resignation from the Senate due to health concerns. His daughter's long-term behavior became too hot for him. My former company's stock closed at $59 on Friday. My stock purchase at under $45 was confirmed. At sunset on Thursday evening, the helicopter began its descent. As it descended, I saw my parents coming out of the back of the house to greet me. After the pilot turned off the engine, I stepped out from under the rotating blades and took the suitcases he had taken out. As soon as I passed the spinning blades, I straightened up, allowing my mother to see my face. My father had to support her as she reeled from tears and shock. More than 15 years have passed since I saw their faces. Mom continued to cry. My baby has returned home. She spent the next 2 days acting like an overprotective mother, trying to feed me because she thought I looked too thin. Homemade food has never tasted so good. At 2 minutes before 2 on Saturday, Jennifer walked out of the church door, which was my cue to get out of the limousine. As I walked up the steps to her, a CNN reporter caught me live and asked who I was. I turned around and said with a serious face, "I am the Walking Dead man." Then he walked over to stand next to the bride. Jennifer looked stunning. After we exchanged kisses on the cheek, we walked inside, arm in arm. Each of our faces showed pride. The camera recorded all this. I noticed the image of Joan from behind, and to be honest, her ass still looked good as she led the wedding procession down the aisle. She looked good from behind. She still had an ass to die for. Next came the boys with rings and the girls with flowers, who made sure to sprinkle some rose petals as they walked. Joanne walked next, then Judy walked right in front of us. I told Jennifer to relax, which made Judy turn around. I raised my index finger to my lips, signaling her to remain silent. Judy whispered to her sister that she had found her father. Tears that wanted to escape began to flow before she entered the main room of the church. Jennifer nodded her head, her face beaming with joy. Looking at Stephen, I noticed that everyone must have been wondering, where is the groom? I watched as Joan sat down next to the man who I assumed must be James. If it was him, time had changed him a lot. He now had his father's typical build with a bald spot on his head. Jennifer and I watched as Joanne walked up the steps and took her seat, turning to face us. As tears began to flow, she covered her mouth with her hand to contain her screams. It was almost as if she couldn't believe it was real. Judy then stood next to her, holding her hand and whispering in her ear. She also joined her sister in tears. I released my daughter and watched her walk up the steps until she stood next to Stephen. "Who is giving this lady in marriage?" asked the priest. I said, "Her mother and I," then went and stood next to Stephen. It was a beautiful ceremony. Many would say it was the most emotional ceremony they had ever seen as tears of joy streamed down my 3 daughters' faces. I couldn't help but notice that my daughter's mother and my brother were completely pale. Neither of them could look me in the eyes. Their eyes were downcast throughout the ceremony. During the evening celebrations, I was asked many times how I became my son-in-law's godfather. Could it be that I introduced them to each other? When we signed the marriage registration form, the Catholic priest was shocked when I signed my legal name. Almost all the witnesses to this marriage who knew about me now knew that I was alive. Although nothing was said out loud, I could tell that cell phones were being used everywhere. We later learned that there were 3 live broadcasts. The judge and senator had made plans by the end of the day. Both saw the situation as a disaster that would compromise the 2 families in every way. Since I had served in the Marines before the triplets were born, it was decided that I would be re-enlisted. So for over 3 years I was hidden in plain sight, fighting the Taliban alongside my brothers in arms. There was no mission I would refuse. They said something was driving me. I got a reputation for being very tough. But it was a low-quality body armor, which in the end did its job. As a result, I had 8 gunshot wounds on my chest. I barely survived. After receiving my dismissal papers, I was no longer a major. I went to the Cayman Islands to reorganize my accounts before deciding what to do with the rest of my life. The judge and my grandmother met me there on the family estate. It was my grandmother's idea that if I couldn't decide what to do, I should take the opportunity to throw a dart at a map and see where it would take me. This stupid sentence brought me here. The congratulatory line was fun. Judy and Joanne stood on either side of me. They made the most of introducing me to everyone. Pride shone on their faces. However, I felt uncomfortable in a tuxedo. Joan and James were the last to go. Stephen was polite, but Joan was not, because she seemed to be in complete shock. "Mother," said Jennifer, "you should know that Dad didn't find me, I found him. I was the one who released all the information about what you both did. Dad reluctantly gave me copies so I could prove to my sisters what really happened. He had no idea what I was doing. What James and you did to all of us is unforgivable. I decided that this had to be fixed. I had to prove that he was not the loser you made him out to be." Joan was furious. Her anger made her want to scream, but she held her tongue and left without saying a word to me. James stood there for a few seconds, looking at me, trying to understand me. "We need to talk. We need to deal with this, John," James said softly, looking at me and trying to decipher my thoughts. "I'm already working on it," I replied without extending my hand. James looked at me in shock, as if he had no idea. "I will treat you with the same compassion you showed me. And we all know that he was not there. You created your own bed, now live in it," I said in a cold voice. "I will be interested in watching the consequences." We stood and watched as the couple walked out the door. My 3 daughters saw a big smile on my face. Steve said, "Oh, something's brewing." I just laughed, knowing that as soon as they walked onto the steps of the church, they would be handed summonses. Joan will be served with a summons for divorce on the grounds of adultery. James for alienation of feelings. The media will record this again. Their nightmare will only get worse. It was time to head to the park for a photo shoot for the wedding album, so we, the wedding procession, climbed into a large limousine. Along the way, sharing a glass of champagne, Jennifer explained everything to her sisters, who held my hands tightly. They were surprised to learn that Jen had spent 2 weeks with me getting to know Stephen's parents. My 3 daughters have grown up to be very beautiful ladies. They made me proud. Jen explained how we went through all the things I had collected about her over the years. Jen said she was under the impression that I knew more about her than she remembered about herself. Then she added that I have the same full folder for each of them. "It proved to me," Jen said, "that he never stopped loving us." The only awkward moment during the photo shoot was being photographed with all the parents. All 5 of us. We got around this by placing Connie and Bill in between the others, and the fact that 3 of us were hard to get to smile. James and Joan were not in the mood. Their world was falling apart quickly. My identity was now revealed, and the media had a real celebration. Everything they thought they knew was being reconsidered. As always, the Democratic media made mountains out of molehills. The wedding dinner was beyond all praise, and when it was time for toasts, I, as the best friend of the groom and father of the bride, walked with tact. I explained it honestly, sharing how, thanks to his good parents, whom I consider best friends, we had developed a close bond, and how I saw him as the son I never had. I talked about some of the funny situations we found ourselves in and how they brought us closer together. I admitted that I was completely surprised when he introduced me to his fiancée. I concluded by expressing my hope that they would grab hold of their dreams and hold on to them. My mother's face glowed with pride. When Stephen stood up, I almost cried. He began by saying that it is rare for a groom to say that his father-in-law is his best friend. Jennifer's father paid for my higher education and advised me in many difficult situations. It was a shock to all of us that day in June when I learned that John was Jennifer's real father. I will never forget my father's words when he said that I was lucky to have Jennifer as my wife. To both of my fathers, I want to say thank you for making me the person I am. When the bride and groom began their dance, they took over the entire room. To date, I have never seen a more beautiful bride. Judy and Joanne wouldn't let me leave the dance floor, both wanting to share as much time with me as possible. Apart from my mother, they controlled all my time. The master of ceremonies came on stage to announce that it was time for the bride and her father to dance. Before we begin, with permission of the bride and groom, I would like to turn the microphone over to General David Bloomberg. The general stepped forward. He said he came to present 3 medals to Charlie in the helmet. I had to laugh. Charlie, wearing a helmet, was a major in command of a platoon of SEALs, he said. They set off on a mission that remains classified to this day, only to find out upon arrival that it was an enemy trap. Our intelligence was completely wrong. The 2 platoons sent with them were also trapped. They were surrounded. Every fighter rewatching this failed mission said it was like a modern-day Custer's last stand. After 2 days of fierce fighting, when our forces were on the verge of exhaustion, the order was passed down the line to load our bazookas to the limit and pass them along the line. The average Marine might carry one of these with all of their gear. Charlie, putting on his helmet, took off all his clothes and equipment. He remained only in a bulletproof vest, helmet, boots, and underwear. Everyone around him was telling him that he was crazy, but he told his deputy, "Win or lose, if we don't take the risk, we're all going to die. Since I am already a dead man going to everyone I love, I must give my people a chance to survive." He loaded his body with 2 such bazookas, threw a few into the aisle, put on his helmet, took a cigar between his teeth, got up, went out into the clearing and opened fire. His first shot hit the ammunition, causing several explosions and forcing the well-hidden enemy to flee. After a few shots, he turned around and fired a few more shells at pre-selected places on the slope. He was wounded 23 times while still firing before he fell, but only 8 of them were serious. The enemy's actions were disrupted by his actions, and they fled like cowards. Every man who served with him still swears that he alone saved all their lives. So I'm here to present 2 Purple Hearts and 1 Silver Star to Major Jonathan Charles Barnes, Roman 3. I only wish I could do it in front of his people. I walked up and the general attached them and then saluted. My parents and 3 daughters were very proud. My daughter Jen finally took me to a father-daughter dance. She chose an old 60s song, "Your Daddy's Home." It was a very emotional dance for both of us. When the Motherson dance was announced, I walked over and grabbed my mother, joining Stephen and Connie on the dance floor. It was clear to see how much this meant to her. It was written all over her face. Later, the bride and groom disappeared to change into her leaving clothes, and when they returned, Jen found an envelope lying where she was sitting, addressed to the bride and groom. Inside was a cashier's check for $2 million with a note that read, "Follow your dreams." Jen started crying when she saw my signature on the check. I slept until almost noon on Sunday and went to bed around 6 in the morning. After the wedding reception, Judy and Joanne dragged me to a Chinese restaurant that was open all night for a midnight dinner. Both girls wanted some alone time with their dad. Before we parted ways, we exchanged phone numbers, current addresses, and arranged for my sweet daughters to come to my home for a couple of weeks. After I went to the restroom, shaved, and showered, I got dressed in my usual clothes: jeans, a white t-shirt, a denim button-down shirt that I left undone, black socks, and cheap sneakers from Walmart. Brands and fashion didn't impress me. I felt the richest when I dressed like that and drove my old Ford. I was a simple man who led a simple life. When I came downstairs, the house was full. Mom and Dad, Bill and Connie, their 7 children, and my 2 daughters. Connie told my daughters how I saved their marriage and explained how for 10 years all our friends had been trying to figure out if I was straight. Your father, although not a religious man, had the patience of Job. He never gave us any trouble when we tried to get him a date. It shocked us all when Jen called him Dad because we had no idea. Until that moment, we thought that the most important thing in his life was his 2 black cats. After greeting everyone, I went to the kitchen for coffee and lit a cigarette. Mom joined me in asking what I wanted to eat, and I told her 6 pancakes, 3 soft boiled eggs with runny yolks, and 4 slices of bacon. She was delighted and began to take out the frying pans. The cooks moved out of the way, knowing that she was cooking for her son. Dad came in while I was sitting to tell me the news. The media made a fuss. The headline in the New York Times read, "Dead Man Walking Alive." CNN told the story of my military service and interviewed those who served with me. Most of them were surprised that I remained alive after being shot down. My father found it funny when one of them remarked that the only thing not to say to Charlie was that it was impossible, because he always found a way to do it. He liked to irritate his bosses. As a leader, he pushed his team only as much as he pushed himself. Under his leadership, we all became better people. It turned out that Joan was married to 2 brothers, and without a record of divorce, I must have been one of the most famous cuckolds. It was said that Senator James Barnes bought himself an expensive bitch when he climbed into her bed. I couldn't hide my smile. CNN did a daytime special promoting this lifestyle. Feminists applauded her, praising her for the lifestyle she led, but even their comments were criticized. The television company sent a film crew to interview people in our small town. Most had nothing but good things to say, but it was surprising how things escalated for 5 minutes of fame. Dad laughed. The media blew it up and really ruined everything. According to them, by the end of it all, the country will think you're a saint, and you haven't even said a word. Both Joan and James are in trouble. I stood up and poured more coffee right before my mother brought me a plate, then sat across from me, watching me eat. She was still recovering from the fact that the youngest in the family had returned home. "Dad," Joanne said, "your brother claims he didn't know what Mom told the judge because he was looking for you. Do you think that could be true?" "Who knows?" I replied. "We know that for 3 years she was having an affair with him behind my back. It's impossible to remember everything we said or didn't say. They had to discuss the consequences if they were caught, and what they would do if that happened. Yours, the mother, felt confident enough to say what she said that day. She was mentally prepared for what happened. Her own choice of words proves it. Either way, they expected the family to handle it. Both of them used us. Everyone." "Oh God," Joanne said. "You didn't look at it from a personal point of view, but from the point of view of how it affected everyone around them, it paints a different picture. So who set this all up, Mom or James?" "James was never a leader. Even in the Marines, he played it safe. Your mom and I both like to take risks, so it should be up to her," I replied. "Jennifer told me that your gift last night, if invested properly, would set them up for life. She didn't tell me how much it was, but she told me to tell you that they're investing the money for 5 years because they don't want to waste it," Joanne said softly. "Just so you know, conversations about what was done are just beginning. No one knows what will happen in the end. You will never know until this is revealed what people with money and power will do. On Saturday, your mother was called to court. It's time for us to get a divorce," I said. "Your sister is very wise. When you and your sister get married, you will receive the same amount." "When did she receive the documents?" Joanne asked. "The moment she left the church. James was called too. I'm suing him for breaking family ties. One way or another, they got into trouble. I froze the family trust because I didn't die. Everything in it will be examined by lawyers. If they put in their own money because of what was done, I can have their money too," I said. "James will have to pay out several million to settle the case." Joanne looked at me without saying a word, then said, "Damn, the house they live in is owned by a trust. I think everything belongs to them. They might be in a lot of trouble." "It's definitely a mess. I feel sorry for us all. The lawyers will take a lot anyway, no matter what. This was done to protect those who no longer need protection. Unfortunately, it's always the innocent who suffer," I said. Judy listened to the conversation. I could tell she had something on her mind, so when she asked me if she could talk to me alone, I wasn't surprised. With Dad's permission, we went to his office. "Dad," Judy said, "I have a friend whose ex-boyfriend has been violent in the past. He has restraining orders against him and has been arrested several times already. He is due to be released next week, and we are both afraid he will come after her again. She is a nurse. I work with her, and we live in the same apartment. She started an 8-week vacation and has some money in the bank. Mentally and emotionally, if it weren't for her job, she would be completely broken. Feels safe and secure. I think she needs to go. She was at a wedding last night, And for the first time in a long time, she showed great interest in the man who, in her words, walked tall and carried a small stick. Should I introduce her to you? Of course it's possible. But you know, we're flying home tomorrow, so what do you really want me to do? I asked. From what Joanne told us about her 2 weeks with you and what you both did, I want you to take her home with you. This seems like the ideal situation for her to fully heal. Bill and Connie are great people, so I know she'll fit in, Judy said. If you don't do it for her, will you do it for me? Is she that important to you? I asked. So, who is this man she's interested in? Yes, she is important to me. I see her almost as an older sister who should have married a good man a long time ago. The man she is interested in is you, she laughed. With your background, I know you can protect her. Dear daughter, you are trying to get me a date, I replied with a laugh. Remember, I have reached the age where I am old. You can answer that yourself, she'll be here in an hour, she said with a big smile. Remember, Dad, age doesn't matter. A man does such things for the sake of his daughters. Joan and I got married right after she graduated from high school. Her father introduced me to her when he was on overseas duty. I was a sophomore. For me, it was love at first glance. I joined the Marines with my father's permission and encouragement at age 16. It came to me like water to a fish, and I did a great job. My combat instructor said that I was older than my years. Through mental toughness and determination, I quickly rose through the ranks. The only thing that was difficult for me was to continue my studies. The only thing that was difficult for me was to continue my education while living in the barracks. Fortunately, studying has always been easy for me. I graduated in 3 years instead of 5. I was 6 years old when my twins were born, and my first discharge was when they were 2 years old. I considered myself a young 44-year-old father. My father always said that I was too successful and ready to marry my company, so I left. Thanks to the computer age, my brokerage company expanded throughout North America within 4 years. I've always traveled for business. I must admit that I was too busy. Dad and I were playing in the backyard when Judy came out with her friend. When we watched them, as I approached us, I noticed that Judy's friend had long, natural blonde hair. Dad said she has the same hips as your mom. Good breeding stock, he said with a grin, adding, I like them when they're bred for comfort rather than speed. I learned that Barbara Ellen Patterson was 33 years old, never married, and grew up in a small town in Ohio. She was 5 feet 9 inches tall, 3 inches shorter than me. She had broad shoulders, a decent build, and was damn good at hoops. He and Dad made mincemeat for Judy and me. After a couple of games, the ice broke, and we started chatting like old friends. After talking to her a few times, I excused myself and went to my father's office to make some phone calls. Finally, I opened the door and yelled for Barbara and Judy to come in. I told Barbara that I had one of the directors of the local hospital where I lived on the line who wanted to talk to her. While she was talking to him, Judy and I went out into the hall. "What's going on, Dad?" asked Judy. I answered, "She's being offered a permanent position in the emergency department starting this month, if her references hold up, which from what you've told me, I'm assuming it will. If she agrees, she can ride with me. The wages won't be as high as here, but the cost of living will be lower," I said. Judy hugged me and kissed me on the cheek. "Thanks, Dad. I knew you could handle it. I discussed this with Joanne, and she thought so too. You made it possible that she could finally put the past in the past. Thank you for freeing her." Barbara accepted the offer. The change that happened to her was amazing. Her true natural warmth and loving nature began to emerge. It was a joy for all of us. My father, being an attorney, created a power of attorney that would allow Judy to act on Barbara's behalf. I suggested that Barbara create a new email address and send it to everyone who would like to stay in touch, telling them that she would send them her new phone number through that address and update them through the new email address within a week. Barb, Judy, and Joanne were delighted. They soon ran out of the house to help Barbara prepare to leave. The plane took off at 4 and landed at the port a little before 8. Connie and Barbara became friends along the way. Bill and I were discussing how impressed he was with my parents and my daughters. He advised me to be careful because Barb was a married woman. My former company's stock was now worth $103. Tomorrow morning CNN will receive an envelope via courier delivery containing my death certificate and the location of my grave. It was a little after 9 in the evening when we arrived at Spuzham. I drove past the small hospital so Barbara could see where she would be working before we headed back out of town to my house. The further we drove from the East Coast, the happier Barbara seemed. As I pulled the truck into my driveway, I realized I needed to get a second vehicle. The population of Spuzham was now about 3,000 people. The town was turning into a small tourist town. When she saw my house for the first time, she said that she had not been in a log house since she was a child. Before bringing her luggage in, we walked out into the front yard so she could see how my house looked above the village below with the sawmill, the boats on the docks, and how the view of the Pacific Ocean was endless. It was like a picture on a postcard, and she fell in love with the place. I told her that dusk falls between 9:30 and 10 p.m. When we entered the house, I told her that she was the second person to stay at my house. Neither of us knew then that she would never leave. I woke up before Barbara on Tuesday morning. I'm still amazed, remembering that morning, how refreshed and beautiful she looked as she walked down the stairs. It seemed as if she had stepped out of the clouds into the sunlight. Without makeup, she oozes rustic appeal, dressed in jeans and a tank top. She would fit in perfectly. "Coffee in the urn, sleepy head," I said. "Sugar on the counter, half and half in a box in the refrigerator." "And good morning to you too," she replied. "What's new in Charlie's world?" "Let's turn on CNN and find out," I said with a smile. I turned on the TV with the remote while I watched her pour herself a cup, then checked what was in the refrigerator and cupboards. She stated that we needed to do a lot of grocery shopping if she was going to cook. I heard her say to herself that it was a beautiful house, but it needed a feminine touch to transform it from a bachelor pad into a home. It reminded me of what my mother used to say. CNN made a splash after receiving the death certificate. They discovered that the signature on it belonged to a doctor with a dubious past. He was currently serving his sentence. A TV crew was sent to the burial site in an area often used by the mafia. When Barb saw my smile, she said, "You knew." I had to admit that I knew. Then I said that the judge, when defending himself, arranged this a long time ago. After his death, I inherited his property in the Cayman Islands and realized that he was going to make them pay. I asked the caretaker to send this information. She laughed and said that Judy, Joe, and she spent most of Sunday night and Monday morning talking about the whole situation. They all agreed that Joan and James got what they deserved. All your daughters seem to hate what their mother did. Your daughter has made it clear that if I hurt you, she will hold me accountable. All three of you think you're walking on water, Barbara said. I had to promise Judy daily reports on how we were getting along. After breakfast, let's go to the port so you can get your Washington State driver's license, apply for your nurse's license, and do some big grocery shopping if that suits you. There's a Golden Corral there so we can have lunch early, I suggested. Sounds like a plan for the day if we can include a visit to the hospital so I can go to HR and fill out an official application, she replied, handing me her phone. I need you to put our legal address in the notes so I have it. After we stopped for coffee before heading out, she asked if she could drive. I allowed it, and she had a smile a mile wide. She operated the clutch as if she had been doing it her whole life. When I said I was surprised at how well she was doing, she explained that she had been driving tractors since she was 9 years old. If you live in the country and don't drive a manual car, that's like saying you'll never be successful. We did this after lunch and then visited the local government office where she was told that her new licenses would arrive within a week. Then AT&T, then Walmart. The products we bought filled the truck, we overloaded it. I didn't expect to buy a new set of copper non-stick pots and pans, a full set of cookware for 12 people, or new cutlery. Her explanation was that my pathetic kitchen equipment showed that I simply wasn't cooking, which was true. While she was in the hospital HR department, I called my insurance agent, so our last stop was the local Jeep dealership where I purchased a new, fully loaded Jeep 4x4. My insurance agent faxed proof of insurance so we could drive home with it. She led him home, following me all the way. When we got home, she let me unload the groceries and then told me to get out of the way and leave her alone so she could organize the kitchen properly. As soon as the Dawn dishwashing liquid was unpacked, she began cleaning every cabinet before unpacking anything. It was as if she was setting up a new home. I watched her in wonder as she organized the kitchen, making it her own. I should have seen the warning signs, but I was blind. I went into the living room and turned on the news. If it weren't so sad, I would laugh. They found my burial place and asked if I was alive, who was buried there. Only the FBI could answer this. I heard Barbara's phone ring and listened to her talk, realizing it was Judy getting an update. So I yelled, "Tell Judy you haven't fucked me yet." Barb did so and then yelled back, "Your daughter says you can be a real jerk." I laughed. I knew I was too old for her, and that was the end of it. It was almost 10 o'clock at night when she finished. To celebrate, I poured us both a large glass of homemade blackberry wine and watched the city lights twinkle below until we retired to our separate beds. I woke up to the smell of frying bacon. When I came down, the coffee was ready. Barbara was wearing a full-length dressing gown with a nightgown included. I noticed it was hand-stitched and asked how long it took. She replied 2 months later, "But how did you guess?" I answered because this quality cannot be bought in a store. She smiled and said that she loves men who notice little things. Breakfast was almost ready. 6 pancakes, 3 runny eggs, and 4 slices of bacon for me with warm, pure maple syrup. I asked how she knew it was my favorite. She said that my mother told her, but I would have to put the eggs on the pancakes myself. She laughed. So I asked her what else my mother told her. She smiled, saying that it was up to me to find out. I smiled and thought to myself that I could get used to this. I told her I was going to stop by the store and pick up the license plates after I paid the taxes on the Jeep. She said it was okay because she found a tape measure in my toolbox in the kitchen and was going to measure the windows for the curtains and blinds. Before I left, she kissed me on the cheek and said, "Remember, dinner is at 6, and it will be like that whenever I'm not working." Then I realized that she was trying to turn this place not just into a place to sleep, but into a home. I returned at noon and bolted the license plates onto the Jeep before going inside. Barbara gave me good news. The FBI began excavating my burial site that very day. We both wondered what they would find. It turned out that my death certificate was issued the day before I re-enlisted. CNN broadcast it live. I received a message from the lawyers asking me to call back. It turned out that Joan wanted a quick divorce and that the trust matter be dealt with separately. She did not contest the grounds for divorce. They believed that by doing so, the time frame for granting a divorce could be reduced since she had already remarried. I told them to continue. Barb said I was doing the right thing. She said she had finished measuring and that we needed to discuss raw materials and prices. I asked, "Why?" She replied, "Because this city is growing, and soon other houses will be built here that may allow them a direct view of your home. Plus, finishing up the house will increase its value." Over the next 4 hours, we discussed each room and ordered items online. After I spent $10,000, I asked her if she expected me to hang them when they arrived, and she said yes, it was a man's job, but she would help. She decided it would be best to contact Judy, and we were glad she did. Judy had inside information about what was found in the coffin. Wrapped and sealed with bubble wrap for protection was a sealed envelope from FedEx. Once it was opened, it contained a note that read, "Next time, James and Joan, when you try to kill someone, make sure the person you hire is competent." It was signed by me. When I heard this, I burst out laughing. When Barb got off the phone, she asked for an explanation, and I told her that before I left, the judge made me sign a bunch of blank pages, as if I were signing a letter. What they found had to be one of them. Barb was just about to start dinner when I received a call to let me know that all my friends and their wives were on their way to welcome Barb to our community. I told her not to worry about starting the preparations because we had a full house waiting for us. They wanted to welcome Barb to our village and group. Looks like Connie spread the word that I was bringing a stylish lady, and my daughters approved. All the women wanted to meet the woman who could attract my attention. They joked all night that they needed to see it with their own eyes. Charlie has finally found a girlfriend. Within 10 minutes, the group had all arrived. I proudly introduced Barb to everyone. We had a country potluck dinner, fried chicken, baked beans, cheese chips, potato chips, fries, coleslaw, fresh rolls, 2 cases of beer, and pecan pie. All the women liked Barbara's choice of tableware. After the introductions, she quickly fit in, talking to the women about the curtains, blinds, and rods they had ordered, saying they should arrive on Friday. It was decided that on Saturday afternoon, we would all get together and hang them. But she insisted that they not bring anything because she would cook food for everyone. Early on Thursday morning, we went to the Ace supermarket in the port. Barb wanted to buy a large gas grill, deep fryer, and smoker with the necessary cylinders. We also purchased an 8-seat patio set with 8 additional chairs and arranged for next day delivery. I bought pre-cut wood to build a couple of tables. On Friday morning, I started building her an outdoor cedar table that, when folded, would sit against the back exterior wall. When in use, it served as the main counter for people getting food. I painted it to match our log home and protected it the same way. She really liked it. Thank God Ace put it together in advance. It saved a lot of time. They arrived with their ladders at noon on Saturday, and the 5 of us guys quickly installed the ladders in all the rooms. We left it to women to hang curtains. I had to admit to everyone that Barb has a great sense of style and design. This made her smile. What we did made the house a lot better, and I accepted that. I laughed because Barb blushed. Bill noted that I would need a garage and storage area for patio items before winter arrived. I had to admit he was right, but if I was going to do it right, I wanted a protected passage with a vestibule for coats and boots, all made of logs. Barb said we needed room for 2 freezers. I sighed. Connie noticed this and said, "You're already planning on having more kids." I blushed and everyone laughed loudly. Connie said, "Poor Charlie, he's already under the thumb and doesn't know it." Everyone laughed again. Barb smoked and slow-cooked 20 pounds of ribs, made a huge potato salad, and made a quick pickled cabbage and regular salad. It was a hit with everyone, so all the women wanted to know how she did it. To reward her for all her hard work, I cooked her breakfast on Sunday, and then we went on a cruise along the coast with some friends. After observing her enjoyment of what we were doing, I decided to take her to Seattle to see the whales and spend the day at their market. When Judy called Barb, she admitted to Judy in private that she was in love. The problem is that I am also in love, but I would never take the first step, considering myself too old and too stuck in my ways. It was an interesting week. We designed and planned the construction in 3 evenings. My 4 best friends happily made fun of me with their jokes about me being in love. No matter how hard I argued, they knew I was in a losing position. A rock removal company is coming in next week to start leveling the extra space we will need. By the time they're done, we'll have county approval to build a 4-car garage, a storage room in the back with a guest apartment on top, and a 16-foot walkway to a huge mudroom for Barb. James and Joan were called in by the FBI. Rumors were that it wasn't going well. Polls showed his chances of re-election were plummeting. The FBI has narrowed the suspects down to 2 possible mercenaries who could be hired to kill me. This was difficult for them due to lack of evidence. Both of them were under investigation. On Friday, I received a call from the president of the company I founded. He wanted to know if I was interested in being the new CEO since I was a large shareholder. I asked for a week to think about it, and he agreed. Somehow this leaked out, and the stock skyrocketed to $139. Then, late Saturday, a severe thunderstorm with lightning struck the city. I didn't know, but it would change our relationship forever. This happened in the middle of the night. I was lying in bed, listening to the heavy rainfall pounding on the metal roof of my house, when the door to my bedroom opened. At that moment, a huge lightning struck. Barb walked in wearing a very tight, almost see-through, low-cut night dress that barely covered her private parts. She was a vision that I would see in my dreams. I pretended to be asleep when she pulled back the sheet and climbed into bed with me. Her body trembled with fear. As soon as the next thunder roared, her body pressed closer to me. I could smell the sweet smell of fresh soap on her body because she took a shower before bed. The smell of lavender filled my nose. Body to body gave me an instant erection. Turning sideways, she threw her leg over my hips, wrapped her arm around my chest, and rested her neck on my shoulder. I haven't felt a woman this close in years. I was a nervous wreck. When she raised her head to kiss my cheek, I turned my head towards her and our lips met. The gentle kiss turned into a slow, lingering one, with tongues being exchanged. Once it started, we couldn't stop. Emotions fueled our desires. Our cold hands explored each other's bodies. We sought each other's pleasure. By connecting our bodies, we discovered our own personal dance. It was a night of wonders and whispers as we both made up for lost time. It wasn't just sex, we made love. She captured me, marked me, won my heart and soul. In the afterward, we acknowledged our feelings of love to each other. It was almost 10 in the morning when hunger demanded that we get out of bed. I went downstairs and turned on the coffee machine, wearing only my pajama pants. While I waited for the coffee to be ready, I cleaned out the urn and poured hot water into our cups to keep them warm. I had just finished this when the doorbell rang. It was FedEx with a special delivery from my lawyer. This was my divorce certificate. The court waived the waiting period due to extraordinary circumstances. I was a free man. Barbara walked down the stairs, her face glowing with satisfaction. Her phone rang and she answered. After a few seconds, she burst out laughing. After a short conversation, she ended the call. "It was Judy," she said. "She asked me one thing." "What did she ask?" I asked. "She asked if I could start calling her mom," she replied before kissing me. "You just had to tell her, didn't you?" I laughed. Barb said that I should have told her that she should make the first move because I would never do that. She was right. I poured us both our morning coffee and walked over to the kitchen table, blending mine just the way I liked it. Barb liked her coffee black, so she picked up her cup and walked towards me, but stopped when she saw the letter from my lawyer. She took it and read it. On the second page, there was a certificate. She looked at me with tears of joy. I stood up and hugged her. "Is it time for you to introduce me to your parents?" she asked. When I said yes, she called her mother to ask if they still had family reunions at the farm on Labor Day. When she said yes, Barb said she was coming home that weekend. Her mother was delighted. Instead of doing it on Monday, they decided to hold the event on Saturday because others had plans on Monday. Judy and Joanne were also out for the rest of the summer. We spent one day going through their files. Both my daughters and Barb were surprised at how much I knew about my daughters' lives. We flew into the Cuyahoga County Airport, where we had a rented small private jet waiting for us. We then booked a room at the Holiday Inn with our luggage. It was a beautiful September day. A plane was booked to pick us up the following Tuesday. Barb hadn't been home for 2 years, but she warned me that her father and 2 brothers were in the military. Since I was the first man she brought home in her adult life, I had to be prepared to be questioned to make sure I was worthy of their only daughter. When we left the hotel the next morning, she took us to the farm. We arrived early, as I assumed, because our car was the third one in the yard. Her mother ran out onto the porch to meet us before we could turn off the car. She was shocked to see her only daughter with a man. Her father, hearing voices, came out to see what was happening. I was amazed. Her father was Bullfrog Patterson, my senior drill sergeant. His first words were, "Well, well." Like all new recruits, I thought he was just a bastard. He put a lot of pressure on me. "Barb, what are you doing with this weakling?" he said, laughing, holding out his hand to me. I had to break him down and make him quit. I threw everything I could think of at him, and he excelled in spite of me, becoming one of the best Marines I've ever trained. This man is tough when it counts. Like a rock, he passed me by because I lost $1,000 thinking he couldn't handle it. He proved me wrong. Bullfrog, I said as Barb and her mother looked at me in surprise. "I'm not going to beat around the bush. I came to talk to Barbara's father because I wanted to ask him for his daughter's hand in marriage. I had no idea it was you." "Are you serious?" asked Mrs. Patterson. "Yes, ma'am," I answered firmly, noticing that Bull had a smile from ear to ear. "You got it, John," was his only answer. "My only daughter couldn't have come home with a better man." With these words, I got down on one knee and took the box with the ring out of my pocket. In front of her parents, I asked her to marry me. Barb, completely surprised, said yes, so I stood up and put the ring on, praying it would fit. It came up. Then I kissed her. After congratulations and a big warm hug from her mom and dad, Bull said, "Give me the keys to the truck and we'll go get a beer. It'll give us a chance to talk." Barb's mom cried for two reasons. Her daughter came home with a man her father approved of, and she got engaged on the spot. Bull and I's first stop was the local Veterans Legionnaires joint for a couple of drinks. He asked if I got a divorce, and I said yes. I explained how I met his daughter and how we met. He knew I came from a rich family, so he didn't have to ask. Of course, he had to introduce me to everyone and proudly explained that I was his future son-in-law. Someone asked me how he got the nickname Bullfrog. I said, "Let me explain. He was our drill sergeant in basic training, and his job was to weed us out. Since I joined at the age of 16 with my parents' permission, he believed that I didn't really want to be there. He made every effort to knock me out. Every mistake I made meant that I added something new because of him. He seemed to put a lot of pressure on me. My co-workers noticed this and wondered why. One night in the barracks, one of the guys said, 'Dude, you take all the hits. Think about him,' I replied. 'Well, he reminds me of a bullfrog sitting on a log catching bugs. The problem is that in his eyes, I am a beetle.' The guys loved it and began to call him his box frog, and this stuck. We dropped a couple hundred by buying beer and rye. I knew that if he had his way, by the end of the day, I would be so drunk that I wouldn't be able to drive. When we returned, the yard was full of cars. We took some beer and rye to the house, then drove his truck around the house and parked it to use the beer as needed. We were greeted by Barb and her mom. Barb put his hand in mine. A voice in the crowd shouted, "Son of a bitch, Casca, Charlie, it's you." I looked up and said, "Pathetic Mike? Old dog, how the hell are you? Dude, good to see you, brother." A few seconds later, we hugged each other tightly and brotherly. We both immediately realized that we were still good friends. Bull looked at us and said, "Do you know each other?" "He's the best tachometer I've ever had," I answered with a big smile. "Bullfrog taught me. I didn't know he was Barbara's father," Bull said. "John, why did he call you Charlie in the hard hat?" When I re-enlisted, I started going by my middle name and rose to the rank of major before I was discharged. I answered, "I got that name from my SEAL team during my last mission." "So you're that tough-ass Charlie who saved my son's life?" He summed up. Mike and I both said yes. Barb came and stood next to me and whistled to get everyone's attention. She introduced me to everyone as her friend. Then he said that my mother had something to say before we continued with the party. Turning to me, she whispered that I was keeping the keys because if I knew my father and brother, you would be too damn drunk to drive. Barb's mom, Gloria, spoke up. "I want to officially announce the engagement of my only daughter Varvara with her retirement. Major Jonathan Charles Barnes. She returned home because Charles wanted our approval before asking our daughter. My husband trained him and said he was one of the best he ever had. It took him at most 20 seconds to voice his opinion. Blessing. As soon as he got it, he stood up and proposed right in front of us. Everyone seemed stunned, but Mike said, 'You'll be my brother-in-law,' and repeated it as if he was trying to convince himself it was true. Over the next hour, Barb introduced me to her extended family. Barb admitted to me that she hadn't seen her family so proud in a long time. Judging by the way they looked, she was right. They got me drunk. I don't know how we got back to the hotel. Damn, I don't remember half the night. I had to ask my future wife if I had disgraced myself. She summed it up by saying that I lasted longer than the other two idiots. This didn't impress me as I tried to get out of bed. Damn, I felt defeated. Barb said I deserved it. I swore to myself that this was the last time. During breakfast, Barb took a photo of her good luck ring using her cell phone and sent it to Judy as an attachment. She wrote that she could call her mom if she agreed to be her bridesmaid. In less than 10 minutes, we were on a conference call. Barb, me, and my 3 very excited daughters. They were all delighted. We learned that James and Joan dealt with the FBI on multiple levels and faced various possible charges. Their defense bills were mounting. Both of their careers were ruined. James carried out DNA tests on his 3 sons and discovered that they were all his. It seemed like with everything he had been through and done, he had doubts in his own mind. It looks like their marriage was on the rocks. My 3 daughters thought he would be lucky if he lasted another year. The money that paid for it was traced back to James, who, with the legal right given to him after my fake death of Joan, paid for it through a trust. This proved that their plans began long before I caught them. Not only that, in his sick mind, everything that happened to him was my fault. He still claimed that he had been framed. Most believed that he had lost all his faith. My trust, which had not yet been settled, was now worth millions, and the lawyers would be fighting over it for months. I told them that the court had placed him in the hands of a trustee pending settlement. The only problem we are facing right now is that my 3 daughters want us to fly to New York for a family celebration. We eventually agreed to come as soon as Barb's work schedule allowed. All the girls insisted on a date. I worked with the board of directors, and my future wife approved my appointment as CEO. Meetings will be held on the 2nd and 4th Friday of each month, and conference calls will be established 3 times a week. I tried to limit the time I spent away from Barb. She became my world. Barb started her first day at the hospital and quickly became part of the team. Working as an ER worker in a small town sometimes provided a lot of free time, so she began taking courses to advance her career. She worked 4 12-hour days one week and 3 the next. Her workdays started at 6 in the morning and ended at 6 in the evening, so I always prepared dinner for her return. Our friends had fun seeing me become homey. It made me wonder if they ever knew about bachelor life. After the first 3 weeks, we flew to New York on Thursday evening so that I could attend a press conference on Friday morning to announce my appointment to the board of directors. After this event, I learned that the court had ruled that all changes to my trust made after my false death was reported were illegal. The court ruled that I must pay James and Joan 19% of its current value, and if they wished to purchase any personal property, they must purchase it at market value if I agree to sell it. This was a serious blow for them. I have instructed my solicitors to sort out the details of the division on the condition that they retain the family home. After the conference, Barb and I returned to my parents' house, where we learned that my 3 daughters and Stephen would be joining us on Saturday. Mom and Dad wanted to have a welcome to the family of sorts. Although she had a staff, my mother cooked for herself. Barb and I had a serious problem. Where and how would we hold our wedding to the satisfaction of friends and family? With the help of our parents, by the end of the day we had decided to get married in Ohio, have a second reception here with family and friends, and a reunion with friends back home afterwards. I asked Barb's brother, Miserable Mike, to be my witness. Judy was Barb's bridesmaid, and Jen and Joe became ladies of the court. Stephen and Barb's other brother completed the wedding procession. We set the date for the last Saturday in December because Barb had always dreamed of a winter wedding. We had just finished a delicious family dinner prepared by my mother when someone knocked on the front door. When Dad returned after opening the door, a big surprise awaited us. It was my ex-wife who asked to talk to me. My instinct told me to refuse. My parents thought the same. Barb said you have to forgive her before you can let go of your past. Connie told me about her betrayal and how your wisdom won them both over. It's time to apply this wisdom to yourself. I went into my father's office for a few minutes before calling Joan. Joan, I said, before we begin, I want you to hear the last words I heard you say many years ago. I was in the judge's office when he spoke to you. Notice your tone of voice and what you said then. For your information, I just sent a statement to CNN confirming that I was there when the judge recorded this and listened to the conversation through the speakers while you spoke." Joan's face turned pale. Now she realized that I knew the whole truth. The media never reported the entire conversation. I excused myself to get a stiff drink so she could hear her own words in privacy as I heard them that fateful day. I returned with the whiskey and water and listened outside the door until the conversation between the judge and her ended before returning to my father's office. Imagine, if you can, this conversation from my side, listening to you deliberately exclude me from our daughter's lives. Try to see it from my point of view: betrayal, pain, suffering, and tears. Think about the price everyone had to pay because you have become a high-class, accessible woman, my older brother. I asked many times what James did during the 3 years he lived with us other than cheat on me behind my back. What did you famously tell our daughter? That the story of their father's death was sad but true. But we can be grateful because it brought Uncle James to you all. I said this coldly and firmly. Have you ever said anything in our relationship that was completely true? Jennifer, Judy, and Joanne all heard the same thing. They all even saw the date it was recorded and knew that it was before my announcement of death. As a result, they now doubt everything James and you ever told them. Their listening to this tape has forever destroyed any trust they once had in both of you, I told her. It seems that time has shown that for James and you, I was nothing more than a tool that you used to achieve your goals. When Jennifer found me, I realized that I could no longer be a living dead. It was time to restore my name, my family, and my life. Family secrets had to end, I said. Joan looked shocked. My words tore through her like arrows of steel. Everything I said pointed directly at her and my brother. Tears now flowed like soft spring rain. I had to wonder if it was out of remorse or shame at getting caught. I stood up from my father's desk, handed her a box of tissues, picked up my drink, and left, telling her I'd leave her alone so she could collect her thoughts. Barb and my parents were in the living room when I walked in. My mom showed Barb all the photos she had collected over the years. "Judging by your face, I can tell that things are not going very well," my father said. Well, she heard her own words to the judge and his response. Before giving her a chance to respond, I asked her to imagine how I must have felt, considering that I was listening to the conversation on speakerphone at the time. I asked her a few questions, and she lost her composure, so I gave her time to collect her thoughts before we talked. I told her that her daughters also heard all this and saw that the conversation took place a few days before my announced death. I pointed out that it was her own. The words destroyed any trust their daughters had in both of them. I walked out because I didn't want to see her cry, I replied. She can no longer deny her past or her lies. "Are you okay?" Barb asked with genuine concern. "Just stating the facts," I said. "It has given me an inner peace that I haven't felt in a long time. The rage and anger I once felt is gone. Now I can accept whatever comes." "Looks like Barb was right," Mom said. After I filled my glass, I went back to the office and sat down. He lit a cigarette and waited for her to start talking. "We saw you as a golden prize. Finally, we could have what we've always dreamed of. A chance to live our lives behind closed doors." When the judge called, James was with me in the kitchen. We both saw him interfering with a fact that it was none of his business. His anger and rage were guiding my thoughts and my responses. "I didn't really think about my comments," Joan said quietly. "You know, the judge was right. Your father received the video I took before the judge called him. Your father asked us not to do anything until he arrived. Within an hour, he was on his plane flying here. When he heard the conversation, he himself was in shock. Both of them felt, as I did, that you both had set everyone up. If this came out, their careers would be over, their reputations would be irrevocably damaged. When Jennifer heard this, she demanded that we do it. DNA test to confirm what they believed. Luckily, she turned out to be my biological daughter. Both would have killed you both if it was legal, I replied. Your comments clearly showed that everything you did was deliberate. Now you know why your own father had little contact with you until now. He told the whole family when he returned home what needed to be done and why. I want to ask, what gave you the right to cut me out of our children's lives? I have to ask because our daughters want to know, I said, standing up as her tears began to fall again, and walked out. What are your thoughts? Asked Barb. She's trying to justify her actions, nothing more. She hasn't shown an ounce of remorse. She hasn't apologized. I feel like the only thing she regrets is letting this all come to light, I replied. Looking at the three in front of me, I realized everything I needed to know. They were all as shocked as I was. We were all trying to understand why she came. We're both considering jail time, Jones said when I returned to the room. The FBI has charged us with at least lying to them, tax evasion, false death, theft, and a couple other crimes related to your trust. Our lawyers are trying to negotiate a plea deal before we're officially charged. James and we both feel that if you had come out in our defense, perhaps we wouldn't have been so harsh. Unfortunately, they never asked me a word until now. Why? I was overseas in the army, defending our freedom while others played their games, I replied with a smile on my face. I really can't help you, can I? You caused this trouble for yourself. I've often wondered if you ever really loved me. Now I know you didn't. I think you'll finally understand that there are consequences for your behavior that money can't fix. You haven't changed. I hoped you would apologize for what you did, but you didn't. You came to try to save yourself. It was always about you and that. What do you want? So please let me walk you out. I think you'll both end up in jail claiming it's not your fault. I couldn't stop laughing when she left the house. Mom and Dad were just like that, so Barb and I had to sleep in separate beds. It made me realize how much Barb and I were connected to each other. There is nothing like the warmth of a body next to you in the middle of the night from a loved one that can soothe a troubled soul. It was a night of restless sleep. It made me appreciate how much we have become one. At about 2 o'clock in the morning, Barb climbed into my room. When she said she couldn't sleep without me, it brought a smile to my face. I replied that such moments make us feel young. When she lay down next to me, I hugged her. When she saw the tears in my eyes, she asked why. I replied that I finally understood what it means to have a loving wife. It became a memory that we will cherish and cherish for the rest of our lives. My words hurt her because Barb started crying. I calmed her down with gentle kisses. I need to know right now, she asked. How do you feel about us having children? I thought for a moment before answering and then said, children have a unique way of keeping the hearts of the aging young. If you can accept the fact that I will be in my 60s when our last child leaves home, I don't see a problem if we have more than one child. It's probably time we started working on this, she said, and so we did. In the morning, Dad was already on his feet when I went downstairs. The entire downstairs floor was filled with the aroma of freshly brewed coffee, which reminded me of my childhood. This was always his morning routine when he was at home. I agreed that coffee brewed this way was richer and tastier than modern drip coffee. Good morning, Dad said as I walked in to grab a cup and join him at the table. I want to thank you and Barb for ruining the night. What? Was my answer. Your mom had to wake me up when Barb snuck into your room to ask me what I thought I should do. He laughed. I told her you're both adults and know what you're doing. It'll be fun teasing her about it for weeks. Tell Mom that Barb and I really don't sleep well when we're apart, which we found out thanks to her last night, I replied. And tell me we're planning on having a couple of grandkids in a couple of years. Barb wants the kids around because of her age. Dad commented, looks like we'll have to look for a house in Spazuma. With me semi-retiring, your mom will want to spend a lot of time being a grandma again. Jennifer and Steve were the first to arrive. Barb and I hadn't seen them since their wedding day, so this gave us a chance to catch up. They were both thrilled to be a part of our wedding ceremony. They told us about their honeymoon. Barb explained what happened when I met her parents, mentioning that I was a fun drunk. She then embarrassed everyone by showing a video clip of her father, brother, and me singing a barrack-style song while drunk. The girls laughed at this, even my father smiled. Steve liked the fact that Barb's father was my drill sergeant and her brother was one of my soldiers. Judy and Joan arrived about an hour later. Judy was thrilled when Barb asked her to be a maid of honor at the wedding, but she hadn't taken it seriously until then. They spent quite a lot of time discussing all the news, where she used to work, and their mutual friends. Mom couldn't help but brag about our plans to have children. Then, of course, Jennifer told her sisters about my famous video, so of course I received a lot of ridicule. Steve convinced Barb to send him a copy so he could forward it to his father. Barb said, "Let them know we're engaged," she said. "We've been so busy with the addition building and her new job that we haven't seen them since the beginning of the month." She explained that it would be a 4-space garage with a huge separate storage area in the back and a 3-bedroom apartment upstairs. We will have a completely enclosed walkway to the mudroom that will be attached to the house. It took them a week to level the site before construction. At the same time, we doubled the size of our leveled backyard and enlarged the patio. We hope to have it painted and sealed to match the house, weather permitting. The excess soil and rocks we removed were used to widen the leveled area at the front. I then told my daughter that I spoke to their mother last night. They all fell silent. Using my dad's internet and Barb's laptop, I played an audio clip of our conversation through my dad's TV. I watched as they listened intently to the judge and Joan's conversation, then to our conversation. Afterwards, I realized that my daughters were stunned. "I don't believe it. No explanation, no guilt or remorse. She came expecting you to help them because she felt you owed her something," Joanne said. "You asked her questions that she completely ignored. It's sad that she's so focused on herself that she can't see how her own actions have affected her," Joanne continued. "In her world, everything seems to be about her. Has she always been like this?" I thought for a while and then said, "Before you 3 were born, I would have said no. I remember my first vacation at home after you were born. Even though I was only home for 3 months, I could tell something had changed in her. At first I chalked it up to overwork, fatigue, and wear and tear, because you 3 were constantly on hand. Then I hired your first permanent nanny and decided to leave the army to help her with you. By the time I left, you were gone. For almost 3 years we were strangers to each other, but soon she began to thaw. Now I see that for her, it was just a mask behind which she was hiding, building her future with him. That's why I asked her if she was. Ever be honest with me," I answered truthfully. "It sounds like she had a nervous breakdown caused by extreme depression after your birth that she never got over," Judy said. "One of the classic symptoms is personality change, which is the way the brain helps them cope. This may explain what happened, but not her actions. It's sad, but after everything that's been done, this is the last straw. My mother and I are done." Both of her sisters agreed. I thought this was one more thing she could blame me for. I didn't know then how true this would turn out to be. To change the mood, Barb invited the girls to help her choose the color of their dresses. I intervened, saying that I would be in black. When asked why, I answered because black is the color of those who mourn a loss. Jennifer asked what I would have to lose. I answered, my freedom. This caused a big groan. My father saw me grab a beer and go outside to think about my thoughts. He knew I had a lot on my mind, so he joined me. "Son, I know this is hard to accept. Don't try to second-guess your actions and what you did. You made the best decisions for all of us at that time based on what you knew. There's no point in looking back. Life is too short. Appreciate what you have. 3 beautiful daughters who make their grandfathers very proud. They carry your moral principles and standards well. My father and mother divided their property between you and me, excluding James. You served your country and saved many lives. You always took the high road in your life, even when everything seemed lost. Today you stand tall and proud, free to live your life as you see fit," he explained. "Your daughters just cut their mother out of their lives. They made difficult choices, just like you," my father said wisely, based on the same knowledge. This should tell you that what you did was not a mistake. It was your actions, and your actions alone, that brought your daughters home. They understand that no matter the cost, You did what he did for the benefit of all of us. This all speaks for itself. My father always had a way of finding a way to make me feel proud. His wise words always helped me come out of the fog and gain a clear vision. Just imagine, you could have grandchildren older than your aunt and uncle, he added with a laugh. Not many people get a second chance to make things better the second time around. Focus on what's to come and leave the crumbs of your past behind. With a smile on our faces, we returned to the house and joined the rest of the family as they continued to plan my wedding. Barb, my mom, and my 3 daughters were now discussing which flowers to choose and why. Should it be a church service or just a wedding in front of a justice of the peace? Will there be a Christmas-themed wedding? I shook my head, so Dad and I spent the rest of the day playing cribbage for a penny a point, doubling down for skunks. I lost $4.65. Let them do it, he said, and just show up to the wedding. It's the easiest way to stay out of trouble. He was right. The Sunday before we left, my mother asked Barb to call her mother to let her know we were getting married there. She was delighted. Barb also made it clear that her future mother-in-law wanted to be involved in organizing the event. Dad heard my mom say on the phone, "Don't worry about the expense. It's my husband and I's wedding gift for these 2, and rolled his eyes. 2 mothers argued about this, but my mother insisted on her own. Ever since she was a teenager, her close friends had always called her Sergeant. They agreed that everything should be cleared with Barb. It cemented in my mind that I would marry my mom because Barb was the same way. The way things turned out made me wonder if I really had a crush on Joan. As we drove home, Barb mentioned that her parents were coming to visit us. Mom wanted to discuss some places, what to add to the menu, what group to hire, and anything she could think of to make things more difficult. They wanted to see what kind of life we lead every day. We didn't even have to meet them. Bull has rented a truck so they can take day trips from our house while they explore the island. It was something he had always wanted to do, and now they had the opportunity. There were a little more than 2 months left before the wedding. The time was fast approaching. We returned home to find the dive had burned down, so I met with the owner on Tuesday morning. He had no insurance and had no intention of rebuilding. I offered him fair market value for the property, and we negotiated his liquor license until we agreed on a deal as long as the local council approved. Within 3 days, the mayor gave his approval. By the end of the week, they had begun construction on site. The builders and construction crews were delighted. They were building a restaurant and bar that took up an entire city block, using logs from the mill in part. With a concrete floor and a shared internal wall between the 2 spaces, everyone was impressed. Using approved village plans, they said they could complete the exterior work in 2 weeks. The former staff agreed to work at the bar and were delighted with its new name, Bullfrogs. Using a nearby real estate agency, we rented out the restaurant space before they finished construction. I hired a Seattle firm to design the bar interior and install it. I paid extra to have everything done urgently. I asked Barb to have her mother scan and email us her favorite photo of Bull in uniform. I used this image to commission glass for the main entry doors with his full image engraved on each door. In front of his waist, on each door, was the name of the bar. Barb ordered furniture for her new apartment. Within a month, she and our mothers practically resolved all wedding issues. The day before her parents arrived, everything was ready. The new bar had its grand opening Thursday night. It was more successful than the old establishment had ever been. Everyone praised our bar food menu. This made Barb smile as she planned out the dishes, giving them unique names. We had 31 days left until the wedding. Barb's parents arrived around 5 p.m. on Friday, so I was surprised to learn in the morning that Barb wanted me to take her to the regional airport in Porto, insisting that we go in a Jeep. We needed to be there at 2. I asked her why. She said it was a surprise. We entered the airport 10 minutes before 2 in the afternoon and watched as a small 6-seater plane landed. I learned something new that I didn't know before. My father flew his own plane. Both looked great. We settled my parents in and were sharing beers when Barb's parents arrived. After we got them settled, it was too late to start dinner, so we took them to our new bar. I took Barb's parents in my old Ford truck and let him drive. My future mother-in-law said my truck reminded her of the truck they used to drive when they started dating. Barb followed us in the Jeep, which became her pride. When we arrived at the bar, Bull was in shock. Seeing his full image on the main doors, he was amazed. My father quietly said to me, "Well done." I told Bull as he came in to shout the command, just as he did when he wanted us to form into formation. He agreed to please me and did it. When he opened the door, he loudly gave the command, as if we were all standing in front of him in formation. 16 former Marines quickly lined up and saluted him, one after another. He walked down the line and shook everyone's hand, addressing everyone by name. Gloria beamed with pride and told me that, apparently, he would have to be carried home. I nodded and laughed. Barb kissed me and said, "I love you," then told her mother that she had no idea that I named our new bar after her father. Charlie refused to tell me about it because he wanted it to be a surprise. Bull was shocked when he saw the poster on the wall above the bar. On it was written, "Named after the toughest drill sergeant of them all, Bull Frog Patterson." Everyone tried Barb's menu that night and agreed that the food was excellent for a bar. Dad and I carried Bull up the stairs to his bed. His former charges got him drunk to the point of unconsciousness. It had been discussed for weeks how much nicer he was when he wasn't in charge. Bull has said for years that this was the second time in his life that he was shocked and amazed. The first time was when I asked for his daughter's hand in marriage. Gloria, my parents, and we were relaxing in the living room, reflecting on the events of the day when she broke the news. Bull was about to retire after 40 years of service and was at a crossroads. Mike was going to take over the family farm at the end of the year, and they were planning to move to the city. Bull took it hard. He still had too much energy and determination to retire. I looked into Barb's eyes and saw her growing concern. "You know, Barb," I said, "if he lived here, he'd be the perfect choice to run the bar." Gloria said, "But where are we going to live since there isn't much affordable housing here?" "Mom," Barb said with a big smile, "we have an apartment for relatives. If Dad agrees, she's yours. I must warn you that the thunderstorms here can be loud and wild." Her mom looked at her and said, "How are you coping with this? Ever since you were little, you would crawl into our bed during a big storm." A smile appeared on Barb's face as she looked at me knowingly. "Charlie helped me love them," she said with a huge smile. My parents understood the hidden meaning and started laughing. Over the next few days, while Gloria and Bull traveled around the island, my parents, John and Silva, spent time looking for a new place to live. We still haven't told Bull about our plans. Gloria wanted to see how he would feel about the area before we formally proposed it to him. The furniture had finally arrived and Barb and I were busy unpacking and arranging everything when Barb noticed an official vehicle pull up to the house. We both went out to meet him. It was the FBI looking for me. They wanted to talk to me alone, but I insisted, since I had nothing to hide from my future wife, to have her nearby. That's how we found ourselves sitting at the kitchen table, sharing coffee. The agent, who introduced himself as Peter McCormick, delivered disturbing news. 2 were arrested last week. My brother James was arrested for fraud, tax evasion, falsifying a death, attempted murder, theft in connection with my trust, and third-degree assault on his wife. He was denied bail. Joanne filed for divorce and also faced a number of charges, but was granted bail because of their children. The problem was that an informant came forward and revealed that James was trying to get information about who could be hired for contract killing, and he may have succeeded. They wanted my schedule and plans for the next 2 months while the investigation continued. They took the situation seriously because there was a clause in the trust that stated if I got divorced and died within 6 months of that date, my trust would be controlled by my ex-wife. The lawyers agreed that until the trust was divided and approved by the court, I could not legally change anything about it. Agents were assigned to investigate events in the area. They made it clear that I could not change my daily plans in any way. Barb and I realized that they were taking this business very seriously. After they left, we sat down and discussed how we were going to tell my parents and what steps we could take to protect ourselves. This was the last Saturday that all 6 of us got together before the wedding. My parents made a deal to buy a 5-acre lot outside of the port and arranged with a local contractor to build a log home slightly larger than ours on a 4-foot basement foundation. They ordered a custom kit online. It should be delivered to the construction site in 3 weeks. Bud wasn't too happy about returning home. He found the slower pace of our small town attractive. Barb, her parents, and I were sitting in the living room. My parents were outside. I asked him, "Bud, how much will you take from the farm with you when you move to the city?" He replied, "We haven't really thought about it. To be honest, I don't like the thought of neighbors 200 yards away." "Why?" "Dad," Barb said, "Charlie and I were wondering if you might want to move here and run the bar for us. You could both live in a relative's apartment for free. Salaries start at $60,000 a year." To say he was shocked would be an understatement, but he promised to think about it. We told him to take his time and let us know when he decided. Gloria later told her daughter that she thought it was already a done deal because Bull was so proud of the bar. He just has to accept it in his heart. So they talked about what Gloria would like to take with her while they prepared a big dinner in the kitchen. We watched them drive back to Ohio. When we got back to the house, I told my parents that we needed to talk. It was hard for my mom when I told them about the FBI visit. She blamed herself for not raising James properly. I gave her the advice the judge gave me and pointed out that he had led a good life until he met my ex-wife. "Remember, Mom, you taught us to associate with those who lift us up, and not those who pull us down. It was your lessons in morals and principles that you raised us with that kept me balanced and strong. It was they who made me the person I am. James just threw it all away." "Well, Mom and Dad," Barb said, "I have some good news that might cheer you up, but you have to promise me you'll keep it to yourself." I looked at Barb in surprise, trying to guess what she was going to say. My parents promised. "My doctor thinks I'll only have 32 weeks left by the time we get married," Barb said happily. "If it's a girl, she'll be Gloria Elizabeth, and if it's a boy, she'll be Jonathan Charles Barnes Roman IV." I almost fainted from shock, and my mother looked like she was about to scream with delight. Thus ended our evening, filled with mixed emotions and new hopes for the future. The next day, the wedding day, Bullfrog, Tiny Mike, my father, and all the other men in the wedding procession gathered at the Legion after the rehearsal to have a few drinks. The women were elsewhere, throwing Barb a bachelorette party. Bull said goodbye to many of his friends and enjoyed the way he rubbed it in everyone's nose. He was leaving Ohio and moving to the Washington area to manage a bar named after him. James's plan was ruined when the contractor hired to carry out the murder was caught after being found guilty and given a harsh 20-year sentence. Joan took a plea deal with a suspended sentence of 5 years after serving her sentence and 5 years of probation, agreeing to testify against her husband. His trial was scheduled to begin in the new year. The trust was settled. Joan put the estate where she lived with her 3 sons up for sale and filed for divorce. The last 2 of our 4 children will start kindergarten next month. Jonathan was born first, followed 10 months later by Gloria, and then twins Silva and Wilford. Jennifer and Stephen have a boy and a girl. Judy married a Marine from Maine who works for a corporation under my direction. Joanne married Tiny Mike, and they opened Bullfrog's bar near the farm. Life is better the second time around. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.